have 4 charging stations, I believe it is, and that was reported by NBC. Does that sound accurate to you?
No, it doesn't.
Well, tell me how many new charging facilities do we have? I'm sorry, 7. There's been 7 built in 4 states. All of these are taxpayer subsidized, and yet Ford can't even sell their cars.
Yesterday I did a video on the failure of the Biden administrations to implement their plans to build 500,000 charging stations in the next 5 years. Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg was the one who was asked about it on Face the Nation, and basically his answer was, it's complicated, we got this, what you would expect out of the propagandists.
The Federal Highway Administration says only 7 or 8 charging stations have been produced with a $7.5 billion investment that taxpayers made back in 2021. Why isn't that happening more quickly?
So the president's goal is to have 500,000 chargers up by the end of this decade. Now, in order to do a charger, it's more than just plunking a small device into the ground. There's utility work, and this is also really a new category of federal investment. But we've been working with each of the 50 states. Every one of them is getting formula dollars to do this work, engaging them in the first handful. Again, by 2030, 500,000 chargers. And the very first handful of chargers are now already being physically built.
Next up to try and answer the question is Secretary of Energy Jennifer Granholm. And while she did a better job answering the question than Buttigieg did, the answer still remained, it's complicated, we're doing it, it's going to take a lot of time. One thing to keep in mind when they're answering these questions about the Inflation Reduction Act is that in August of this year, it will be 2 years since Joe Biden signed the Inflation Reduction Act into law. So in 2 years, they've allocated over $7 billion to be used for these charging stations. According to media reporting, only 7 of these stations have been built. And as per usual with government, it will take forever and will be over budget if they ever get it done at all.
Let's talk for just a second about electric vehicles, if we can. So the funding came in the IRA and the federal budget estimated. Let me get this right here. In the 117th Congress, we passed the IRA. My Democrats colleagues did anyway. And they provided, CBO and JCT estimated that the eliminate spending and tax breaks would cost around $400 billion by moving to electric vehicles, commercial electric vehicles, heavy-duty electric vehicles, tax credit for residential charging equipment, and $3 billion for postal fleet electrification. That was, they estimated that would have a net of $400 billion cost. Since that bill has passed, now for those same programs, the estimate is that the subsidies will be $1.1 trillion over the same period of time. Now, of that, $7.5 billion was generated for nationwide electric vehicle charging infrastructure, and yet it's been reported that we have now 4 charging stations, I believe it is, and that was reported by NBC. Does that sound accurate to you?
No, it doesn't.
Well, tell me how many new charging facilities do we have? I'm sorry, 7. There's been 7 built in 4 states.
So let me just explain this. The National Electric Vehicle Initiative required states to develop a plan in order to be eligible for that $7.5 billion. All states did. We approved all of those plans. All of the funding has been released to the states. These are all state programs. So now 36 states have released solicitations to be able to build out those charging stations. 22 states have announced awards. There will be an additional 2,000 stations built by the end of 2024.
You're guaranteeing that there's going to be 2,000 EV stations?
That is what we forecast.
And that's your forecast. And the result is you're putting those in, the taxpayers are putting those in. All of these are taxpayer subsidized, and yet Ford can't even sell their cars. Most of these lots can't sell them. I would like to introduce into the record the article where Ford is announcing massive losses of $1.3 billion that they're losing on an average $132,000 for every EV that they sell.
Without objection to order.
Thank you.
I guess we'll check back in a couple of years and see how much money they've wasted by then. One of the things mentioned by Andy Biggs when he was questioning Jennifer Granholm was the Ford sales of electric vehicles. CNBC had a pretty good segment on this where they interviewed the owner of a dealership, where for the most part he just highlighted some of the very obvious issues when it comes to these EVs, but it gives you a different outlook than these government propagandists are going to give you when they are asked the question.
The political push to force you to buy an electric car in many states hitting another little bit of a speed bump. In fact, thousands of auto dealers are now calling for President Biden to, quote, tap the brakes on the unrealistic government electric vehicle mandate. Their words. With us tonight is one of those dealership owners, the owner of Celebrity Motor Cars, Tom Maioli. Tom, this isn't like you and a couple other people, right? I mean, this is a lot of car dealers writing this letter to the White House.
Yes, good to see you. This is thousands. This is thousands of dealerships that represent multiple brands, not just one brand, domestic, international brands, and all across the board. And this is basically the voice of the consumer. This is not the dealer. This is the voice of the consumer. And what's happening is the manufacturer is being forced to produce these EVs. They're shipping them to the dealerships and they're backing up on the lots. Our average day supply pre-COVID was 60 to 90 days supply of inventory. During COVID, it was less than 30 because of the supply chain issues. We're now backed up to 12 months with EVs. Consumers don't want them. They're not buying them. We have up to $15,000 in rebates from the manufacturer and $7,500 tax credits. We're talking $22,500.
And people, they think I'm some EV hater. I've owned an EV. I've driven many of them. I'm not. In fact, I've been poking around because I think they're very cool in many different ways. I was looking at a Ford F-150 Lightning, and I saw something, and you have a Ford dealership, and it wasn't on your website, it was on cars.com. I don't know who the dealer was.
Should have been on my site.
I'll go back, okay? But the Lightning retails for what, 95 new, something like that?
Yes.
Okay, right. I saw brand new F-150 Lightning, I mean like 23 miles on it, for $78,000. It had been marked down $20,000. Yes. How is that possible?
Still can't sell it. Consumer doesn't want it. The consumer's in fear over the infrastructure. The infrastructure is not there. The White House and the Biden administration and got way out over its skis with this mandate, and the consumer has to buy into it, and they're not. And the problem that exists now is, they force the manufacturers to spend all this money to build these plants and produce these vehicles, but the consumers aren't buying into it. They're afraid of range. They're afraid of where they're going to charge. And we're not talking about, listen, Tesla is a vanity purchase. People have to have a Tesla. They have a second vehicle. Most people can't afford the first vehicle, never mind the second vehicle. And these people are coming out to the dealerships and they're buying these vehicles and they're afraid. These are average working American people. They're putting their families in the car. Moms are driving their kids to school. Dads have to get to work. And, if they have to charge on the road and it takes 30 minutes to charge.
We're running out of time, Tom. I'm sorry to interrupt, but a crazy night. Can you kill a myth? Because there's going to be people on Twitter that pop up after this segment and say, dealers hate them because they're not getting the services revenue. I talk to car dealers almost every day. I got friends that own them, and they make a ton of money on EV service because the EV costs are much higher. The windshield in an EV is like $5,000.
Listen, we're either going to sell EVs, we're going to sell gas vehicles, or we're going to sell hybrids. We're going to sell something. We believe in EVs. They're a part of the market, but it has to evolve, and they're not letting it evolve.
So this is not like we just hate them because they don't need oil changes, right?
No, not at all. No, we want to sell EVs, but they have to evolve. You have to let the market evolve and the infrastructure evolve, not shove it down the consumer's throat.
As I think it was President Reagan said, we're from the government. We're here to help.